Take some time now to settle into this posture. Bring your attention to feelings. Reasonable that there would be emotional activation. And if there isn't very much going on in terms of emotional body sensations, then just feel that variety of peace. Feeling of not much going on. Of course, there may be a lot going on in other parts of experience, but in terms of emotional body sensations, if there isn't much happening, then tune into that sense of peace. At any moment, there will either be some kind of emotional body experience, or there will be an absence of emotional body experience. Just attend to that moment by moment. Focusing on what we feel, in particular, focusing on emotional experience. If there's anything else going on, thoughts, physical body sensations, sights and sounds in the world around us, we can let that come and go. getting interested in what the emotional experience is moment by moment. So even as we are thinking, is there emotional content or not? There is emotional content. Attend to that. Be aware of that. And if there isn't, or if there isn't anything that's obviously emotional, then attend to that as a kind of peace. Continue to attend to emotional body sensations, taking some time just to feel. Nice to see you. Let's see some colors on a screen that remind me of you. Thanks for tuning in, as they say. We continue this lockdown Dharma series. So we've been using a particular text from the Digha Nikaya, the long discourses of the Buddha, as a way to look at, travel through the world of ancient India in order to look at and travel through this moment, this time in history, and this world. So the text is, of course, following a certain king, Ajatasattu. The text is called the Samaññaphala Sutra, or the text on the visible fruits of recluseship. The text is following this particular king, Ajatasattu, who seems as though he may have been an actual king in ancient India, historically speaking. There are records of him in the Buddhist and also Jain tradition, some other evidence that he existed. And this king is asking a certain question. The central theme of the text is that he's asking a question regarding the visible fruits of the spiritual path. He's asking, what's the point? Why does someone do this? Why would you do this? And through this standard of asking that question, of asking what's the point, of asking really, what do you get out of it? What does someone who devotes their life to spiritual practice get out of that for themselves? Which is, we could say, a self-centered way of looking at things, but maybe not the optimal standard to apply or the best standard to apply, but a pretty good standard to apply. Using this question of what do you get out of it, he has come to reject many of the various ancient doctrines that people believed in at that time. So the place where we've left off in the text, he has come to the Buddha. So he has been convinced to meet the Buddha and has a question. He wants to ask that question to the Buddha. Buddha, it so happens, is staying at a monastery, mango grove, near the king's palace at this time. And so he's gone off and he's now reached the mango grove. He's reached the monastery. And he now has gone as far as he can by way of elephant. He was traveling by elephant, and now he dismounts. And he approaches the door of the pavilion hall, the place where all of the monks, the Buddha, and his company of something like 1,250 bhikkhus were sitting. And then, having approached, he asks his minister, Jivaka, but where, Jivaka, is the exalted one? Where is the Buddha? We were asking last week about what natural means. What does it mean for something to be natural and unnatural? It was a question that came up that we spent some time with. We now get to witness a demonstration of the answer. The king asks his minister where Jivaka is the exalted one, and his minister replies, "That is the exalted one, great king. He is the one sitting against the middle pillar, facing east, in front of the company of bhikkhus." This is unusual, shocking. The king has walked into the pavilion hall and he's looking around and he wants to know which one of these is the Buddha. And so Jivaka says it's the guy in the middle of the room with everyone else around him. The one facing the middle pillar, the one sitting against the middle pillar in the room. He's the person that the entire room is set up around. But somehow the king wasn't clear on this, wasn't aware of this. Came into the pavilion and just didn't notice the Buddha. Didn't notice anyone in that room who was special. Didn't notice anyone who stood out. So this is a significant passage. We are often surprised and taken aback when we find someone who is truly practicing this path because of how unremarkable they can be. Buddha here is completely unremarkable. It's completely ordinary, completely natural. It is to say that he isn't thinking about himself at all. He isn't caught up in some sort of story about himself or some sort of story about others, some sort of story that takes place in terms of self. He's just sitting there. And usually it's the case that when we meet someone like this, we don't know what to do. We're so used to just meeting people and going with their stories about themselves that when we meet someone who isn't telling such a story, we don't have anything to go on. We don't even notice that they are there. So, my teacher, Soryu For All, often talks about the time that he first met his teacher, Harada Roshi. Soryu, the time was 18 or 19. He had spent a long time by that point, maybe 15 years, considering the question of what to do about the destruction of life on Earth due to the human mind, due to the actions, the ignorance, the confusion of the human species. He spent 15 years considering that question carefully and had decided that monastic training might be part of the answer to that question. He decided that he would spend some time training in monasteries in Asia, and so he spent some time in Japan going around, going from place to place, searching for a teacher, searching for a monastery where he could train. Why did he think monasteries were part of the answer to this? Well, simply put, because they were an institution, they were a structure that doesn't just get eaten by the machinery of the world. Soryu was very concerned about this. He spent a long time watching how movement after movement, culture after culture, tradition after tradition would just get eaten up, consumed by this machine of mainstream modern culture, co-opted, appropriated, turned into another device of this vast system of the destruction of life. And he asked the question, are there any organizations or any institutions that don't get eaten, that don't either get destroyed, killed, which is the fate that is often met by various native traditions, for example, in various parts of the world, But then there are institutions that don't just get killed off and at the same time manage to not get swept up into the system, manage to not just get turned into more participants in this destruction, in this horrible, vast Holocaust. And we found that monasteries do this. Monasteries are able to exist for a long time without either dying off or getting co-opted. There are monasteries in the world that have been around for millennia, that have been around and have watched different cultures rise up and fall down around them. The place in India where Soryu trained, where one culture will rise up, exist for a little while, fall apart. A different culture rose up, existed for a little while, fell off, and then another different culture would rise up, exist for a while and fall off, all while this group of monastics just kept on doing the same thing. They barely noticed the coming and going of entire cultures, of entire civilizations. And so he decided to train in a monastery. So happened he'd been taking Japanese for a little while, and so he could speak a little bit of the language. Just coincidentally had been taking it in school, and so he went to Japan and started looking for teachers. And he went to a few different places and he asked his big, impressive questions to the teachers of those places, looking for big, impressive answers, figuring that he would just go with the place that gave the biggest, most impressive answer. And then he came to a little monastery in the Okayama prefecture, I believe, not 100% sure about that, and met someone who wasn't thinking about himself. He had tea with the Roshi, the teacher at this monastery, asked his big impressive questions, and then left utterly disgusted. Thought he'd never met anyone in his life who was more worthless than the man he had just spoken to. He was actually a little bit upset. He was kind of mad that other people were training at that monastery. He was upset that anyone would be training there. This person was just a complete waste of a person, and yet there was this entire monastery that had grown up around him. It didn't make any sense. This person hadn't answered any of Soryu's questions. He'd had all these big important questions, and the person had just given boring, dry, obvious, uninteresting answers that he could have just as easily looked up in a book somewhere. Not impressive, not interesting, not special at all. Soryu left this place in disgust, went to a nearby bus stop in order to go back to the place where he was staying. And at the bus stop, he noticed that this burning fire, anger, hatred, fear in his heart that had been motivating him, carrying him through his entire life, motivating every action in his life for the last at least 15 years. That fire had just gone out. It was just gone. It wasn't there anymore, and it, in fact, according to him, has never come back. It took him a few weeks to consider the possibility that that fire going out had something to do with that tea, having met that person. He had to go through and consider it carefully and logically and analyze. Because it was, of course, a big disruption. His entire motivational structure had just fallen off in one fell swoop. So we really interested in this. I had to ask, why did that happen? Where did it happen? How did it happen? Considered, was it this? Was it that? Could it have been this? Could it have been that? Eventually had to acknowledge, well, okay, I was talking to this guy right before that happened, right before I noticed that fire was gone. So maybe that had something to do with it. Doesn't make any sense. Maybe that has something to do with it. Like some weeks to finally consider the possibility that maybe that tea session with that Roshi could have been involved. What happened there? According to Soryu, of course I can only tell you what he says. I wasn't there. I was giving you my recollection of his report. According to Soryu, in that session, Narada Roshi could just see where he was stuck. You can see that Soryu was stuck on wanting someone to be a big, impressive teacher, and so he just didn't stand in that place. He just went somewhere else, manifested somewhere else, so that that could relax, that could move. And in that way, liberated Soryu of that highly motivated way of doing things, that untrustworthy way of doing things. This is the power that we have when we walk this path, when we stop thinking about ourselves so much. A lot of the time, people don't know how to respond to this. We can just think that we're some way and people follow along. We just decide to be confident, believe in ourselves, just project confidence, even though it isn't valid, it isn't accurate, and people don't know any better. Nobody's really paying that close attention to us. They can't tell whether we're legitimately confident or not. And so they just go with our sense of confidence. Telling a certain story about ourselves, people don't really know who we are, what's going on. For the most part, everyone's too busy telling their own story about themselves. So people just go with our story about ourselves. Walk around thinking, I'm such a screw up, I'm such a failure. People don't know any better, they just go with that. They see you telling that story with your body language, with your actions, with your tone of voice. So they just say, okay, I'm not really paying attention. I've got a lot of problems of my own. I'm just going to trust you on yourself and assume that you're a screw up and a failure. You're saying you are, so I'll assume that you are. And we project confidence. We project a sense of authority, a sense of deservingness, of strength, and people just go with that. I don't really know what's going on. Got too many other problems to deal with to pay attention to you right now. You seem to be saying you're confident. I'm just going to trust you. We're all walking around telling these stories all day long. It's as though everyone's shouting at each other all day long. We may not be physically shouting using our voices, but using our thoughts, our mind, and therefore our body language, our tone of voice, our complexion, our way of holding ourselves. We're all very loudly proclaiming who we are, and so we get used to that, to the point where we aren't even aware that someone is there if they aren't participating in this. They aren't telling a story about themselves. If they're not wrapped up in it, we just forget that they're even there. Many of us have known people like this. We may have people in our lives who we just miss and just forget about. It's like they're not there unless we look for them. certain friend, person who's put together a particular system. It's not so important, but there's a friend, a teacher and kind of well-known figure in the personal growth space, is married to such a person, and he says his wife will often make fun of him. He'll come to pick her up from the airport and not notice her. Look around for her. Where is she? Can't find her. Can't find her. And she's just standing there alone. That's separate from the rest of the crowd. And he just didn't notice that she was there. She's someone who, it so happens, has had has done a lot of training and has had quite a lot of development happen in a certain way, and so it's easy for him to not notice that she's even there. So this point of what is natural is very significant. What is nature? In this training, we spend a lot of time looking at that. Start to notice that we are in some way obstructing nature. Realize that there's a certain experience, there's something here, something that's just happening, but we say no to that, we obstruct it, we prevent it, we try to make something else happen. But with what do we obstruct experience? With what do we obstruct nature? How do we go about this process of obstructing nature? What do we use in order to obstruct nature? How do we go about this process of obstructing experience? How do we go about this process of fighting with this experience? Well, with experience. We don't want to be experiencing, so we obstruct this experience. But we obstruct this experience with experience. We say no to nature. Say, I don't want to experience nature. Nature is wrong and I need to fix it. This is the main orientation that we have towards nature in the modern world. That it's wrong and we need to fix it. But how do we fix it? With nature. How do we obstruct experience? With experience. And try to get rid of nature, but it just keeps on being nature. Just keeps on being reality. His experience just keeps on happening. And so in that way, we aren't actually able to win. Ego loses. Ego can't win. We keep on trying to prevent experience, but we just get more and more tight, rigid, stuck, and we have that experience. Keep on suffering, so we avoid that suffering, but we avoid it with the mind that created that suffering, and so we just wind up suffering. So, King Ajatasattu has now learned who the Buddha is. He's the one sitting in the middle of the room against the pillar. So he then approaches the Buddha and stands off to one side. Uh, he waits in silence, and he's looking out at the company of bhikkhus. He notices how serene they all are. He sees this complete silence, serenity, peacefulness, the sense of wonder and awe. He says, "May my son, the Prince Udayibhadda, enjoy such peace as the company of bhikkhus now enjoys." So the Buddha says, "To your thoughts, great king, follow the call of your affection." This is the first thing that the Buddha says to King Ajatasattu. This king, of course, is tormented. He's in a extreme uh, moral quandary. He has a major problem. He's committed patricide, killed his father in order to take the throne. So he's tormented. He has no rest, no ease, no peace. But at this time, he's exclaimed this exclamation of compassion. He wants his son to enjoy this peace. He wants his son to experience peace. He wants Prince Udayibhadda to experience the peace that these bhikkhus are now experiencing. And so the Buddha uses this opportunity to teach. And how does he teach? By pointing out, asking, pointing out that his thoughts are following the call of his affection. There's a significant teaching for us to look at. We, too, are in a moral predicament. We, too, have a major problem. We have participated in a system that destroys life on Earth. We have blood on our hands, of subjugation of really everyone who we can subjugate, the poorest few billion people on the planet and all of the non-human life. Having killed more or less anyone who we want to kill in order to get whatever we want to get, we also have this moral situation. And so we can consider this teaching. We can observe that as we sit here, as we think, as we feel, our thoughts follow the call of our affection. We wish for ourselves and for those close to us not to suffer. We have a compassionate mind. All the time we can get into the idea that we need to get rid of our mind. Especially if we do this training for a little while, we start to notice just how crazy we are, how delusional we are. We see ourselves just doing the same things that have never worked. Still, have these patterns. The patterns don't work. We see that they don't work. We know they don't work. What do? When we are in a difficult situation, we just go into the patterns. See how crazy we are? We can start to get the sense, this mind of mine is just evil. I just have an evil mind. And if we don't have that sense, of course, it's possible that we've done an enormous amount of work, progressed very far along the path, found a source of blameless joy and integrity. It's also possible that we're just not aware. We just haven't actually looked that closely ever. Haven't actually held ourselves to the standard that Ajatasattu will be holding these various doctrines to. Haven't held our views to the standard of making us happy. Haven't actually ever asked that. Haven't actually asked the question, is this working? In any case, we see how crazy we are. We think, I have to do something about this mind. This mind is such a problem. If only I didn't have this mind. I need to just get rid of this mind. But that actually isn't the issue. The issue isn't that our mind is evil. The issue isn't that we are fundamentally broken in some way. The issue is just that we're not that skillful. We're not that good at using our mind because our mind is untrained, is uncultivated. We haven't done development in terms of ethics. We haven't developed in terms of wisdom. We haven't seen things as they really are. We haven't questioned the stories that we've been carrying around. Because of all of that, we continually make mistakes. And yet we don't wish to make mistakes. We do experience compassion. We just experience a limited kind of compassion. Experience a kind of compassion that is indistinguishable from hatred. Experience a compassion for these over there. And so we do things that seem to locally make things better at the cost of producing externalities that we aren't tracking, that we aren't paying attention to. The solution here isn't to get rid of our mind. The solution here isn't to stop thinking. It isn't to kill ourselves, to kill our minds, crush our minds, beat them down. The solution is to cultivate our minds. To just train our mind so that this compassion is able to manifest skillfully. So that our desire for joy and for freedom from suffering can be followed, can be expressed in a way that is more beneficial, more wholesome, less harmful, less crazy, less delusional. The king responds, he says, "Venerable sir, I love my son, Prince Udaibada. May he enjoy such peace as the company of bhikkhus now enjoys." And so the king paid homage to the Exalted One, to the Buddha, reverently saluted, I suppose maybe bowed or something to the company of bhikkhus, sat down to one side, and said to the Buddha, "Venerable sir, I would like to ask the Exalted One about a certain point, if he would take the time to answer my question." The Buddha says, "Ask whatever you wish to, great king." And the king asks the question that is the centerpiece of this story, is the centerpiece of this sutra. He asks this question, and of course it's in language that is set in a different time, talking about a different world, and yet we can maybe hear the echo of our own world in this question already. The specifics may be different, but the essence is the same. So he asks, there are, Venerable Sir, various crafts, such as elephant trainers, horse trainers, charioteers, archers, standard bearers, camp marshals, commandos, high royal officers, frontline soldiers, bull warriors, military heroes, mail-clad warriors, domestic slaves, confectioners, barbers, bath attendants, cooks, garland makers, laundrymen, weavers, basket makers, potters, statisticians, accountants, and various other crafts of a similar nature. In other words, there are a bunch of vocations, there are a bunch of jobs. This is ancient India, and so there are slightly different distribution of jobs. Seem to be a lot of military jobs at this time, and not as many math-based jobs. Now we have, I suppose, maybe slightly fewer military jobs maybe 2 or 3 or 4 kinds of soldier, and probably many more kinds of statisticians and accountants. There are Rails programmers and Haskell programmers and C programmers, and there are medical programmers and financial programmers. We're in the Bay Area, after all, and production engineers and corporate engineers, and on and on and on. The point is, there are all these jobs. There are all these jobs. There are all these crafts. And so he says, all those who practice these crafts enjoy here and now the visible fruits of their crafts. They obtain happiness and joy for themselves, and they give happiness and joy to their parents, their spouses and children, and their friends and colleagues. They establish an excellent presentation of gifts to the spiritual practitioners, the holy ones, leading to heaven, ripening to happiness, conducing to a heavenly rebirth. Is it possible, Venerable Sir, to point out any fruit of recluseship similarly visible here and now? Any fruit of the spiritual life that is similarly visible here and now? This is a good question. We can observe that as we do the various jobs in this world, there are visible fruits of these jobs. We feel happiness and joy for ourselves. It's fun. Many of us have jobs or have had jobs. Few of us, I suppose, now have jobs than a few weeks ago, but some of us may still have jobs. It's fun. It's fun to be able to do a job, to be good at something and to practice that craft. That's just fun and enjoyable in and of itself. I know when I had a job once as a programmer, and it was fun. I was one of those, I was never a day job programmer. I was always in it for the fun of it. And so I would work all day on some kind of challenging problem, then I would go home and work on it some more because I wanted to. I'd go home for the weekend, and then I would try to build something else, something clever, something interesting. I would go out with my friends who I worked with, who were my coworkers, and then I would come back to the office afterwards and I would write some more code. It's fun. It's enjoyable. You want to do it. It's satisfying. There's an innate satisfaction in it. Furthermore, we give happiness to our loved ones, to our parents, to our relatives, our spouses, our children, and to our friends and colleagues. We're doing something that the world approves of. The world is saying you're doing good work, and so our parents are satisfied. They're relaxed. They're happy. Not like when I said I would rejoin the monastic academy, when my parents were very concerned, really upset at the sense you're not going to be able to have a family in there. You're not going to be able to make money in there. You're not going to be able to buy a house in there. I was giving up that kind of joy and happiness for my family. The sense of ease, the sense of knowing that your child is safe, is all right, based on doing what society says they should do. Furthermore, we establish an excellent presentation of gifts to the spiritual practitioners. I suppose in the modern world this is maybe donation to effective altruist charities or something. We establish an excellent presentation of gifts to holy ones. We give to good causes. Because of this giving to good causes, there's this giving, we suppose, leads to heaven, makes the world a better place, ripens in happiness, and conduces to a heavenly rebirth. We get to have it be that the world is a nicer place. So is it possible to point out any fruit of the holy life that is similarly visible here and now? So he asks this question. The Buddha then asks him a question. He says, Do you remember, great king, ever asking anyone else this question? King says, yeah, I do remember asking other people about this. The Buddha says, if it isn't troublesome for you, then please tell us how they answered. The king says, it is not troublesome for me, venerable sir. And the Buddha or anyone like him is present. So he's now going to relay the answers that he's gotten from the various ancient Indian traditions to this question. So, won't have time to go into that too much today, just due to time, but well, maybe we'll leave it on a cliffhanger. Well, let's save the best part for next week, Really, because this is the fun part. This next part of the sutra is the fun part, especially for us in the modern world. We really enjoy, this modern world, these modern views. I have the sense that because we have so many books now, more books, in fact, than ever before in history, and we've read them more, and we have more time to read the books. We get to have such refined views. I really enjoy looking at ancient traditions and, mocking them. Say, look at what these primitive, undeveloped people 2,500 years ago used to believe. My, how far we've come. You get to say, well, our civilization is the oldest civilization in the world. It's been around the longest, and therefore it's the wisest. All those other ones were younger and also dumber. Why? Because things get better over time. We have a chance now. Do what we believe in so much. Examine these ancient doctrines, these discredited, foolish, ancient religions in India of 2,500 years ago. Such religions as materialism, determinism, the doctrine of the lack of moral cause and effect, agnosticism. To have some fun, poking fun at these ancient, discredited traditions. Looking at those people and saying, my, can't believe that they believe things like that. Read through these things and it's absurd. In each of these cases, Ajatasattu asks this question. He asks, is there a visible fruit of the holy life? And each of these religions answers in this completely absurd way. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if you had a real question? If you had a real question like, what's the point of this? And someone responded by saying, well, guess what? At the end of this life, you die, and then there's nothing after that. And that's just how it is. And that's not even answering the question. Let's set aside for the moment the question of whether that is true or falsifiable. You haven't answered the question. So, we will we'll look at this in more detail next week. For now, I'll just say that although, again, we can say that the king's question is a little bit confused, is a little bit self-centered, it's narrow-minded, it's talking about just human people, it's talking about just what do you get out of it. We can say that maybe he ought to have asked the question, asked a more mature question. Still, nonetheless, it's impressive that he's asking this question. that he's holding the various doctrines of his time to that standard. He's holding the doctrines to the standard of leading to happiness, of being beneficial. This is impressive. We ourselves can and should, I would say, hold our own standard, our own views to this standard. Ask this question of our own views, of our own ideas. Is this working? I keep on seeing things in this way. Is that working? Of course, we don't want to just have it be about benefit to ourselves and others. We want to go further than that. We want to ask, well, is this true or not? Is it valid or not? Is it accurate or not? Still, we should, I would say, start there. Observe the consequences of what we believe. We believe something and it reliably leads to suffering for ourselves and for others around us, then, I don't know, maybe look at that. Maybe question that. We have this idea that we keep on hashing out again and again, keep on experiencing misery, suffering, confusion, pain. Maybe look at that. Have some sense, I should proceed in this way. This is the right way to do things. I'm in a situation and I need to do something, then this is how I'm going to respond, and it keeps on causing suffering. Maybe look at that. Hold our own views, the standard that this king held the views of ancient India to. Ask the question, what's the visible fruit of this? Does this have any benefit? What's the use carrying on in this way? Believing things like this, believing this story, believing this view. Is this helping anyone? So, we have a little bit of time now to practice meditation. We get to sit together for a little while, knowing that we are in fact sitting together, even if we're elsewhere. We can look at the colors on the screen, know that those are real people, and know that if we look out in the four directions around us, those people are all there. We look out, north, east, west, south, far enough, we will see everyone who we're sitting with right now, and in fact, everyone in the world. I have a little bit of time now to sit with everyone in the world. Once more, establish posture and breath conducive to sitting. Very helpful to spend some time exploring posture, whether we're sitting or standing or lying down or walking. Pay careful attention to our posture and our breathing. Explore sitting in a posture that allows us to experience connection with everyone. In other words, a posture in which it is somewhat difficult to think about ourselves. And breathe in a way that is in accord with connection to everyone. In other words, to breathe in a way so that it's difficult not to feel fulfilled. Whether there's pain or discomfort in experience, of course, it's okay to move, to adjust. It's also okay to just welcome that pain and discomfort. This pain, this discomfort is also an aspect of our connection with everyone. And experience pain and discomfort is to experience having a body. There's confusion, thinking about this and that. And that, too, is an aspect of nature. Just experiencing what it's like to have a mind. Our mind's nature will be confused, a lot of thoughts. We're experiencing in this way an aspect of connection with everyone. As we continue to sit, if you like, you may use the breath as an anchor for attention, constantly directing your attention to the breath in the belly, keeping your attention on the breath in the belly. Using this to move through experience. Allow this experience to become unblocked and flow naturally. How to attend to the breath in this moment. Will this be an adventure, an exploration, try different things, experiment? What happens if I sit this way? What happens if I breathe this way? In this way, explore cause and effect within this experience. So we have a little bit of time now for discussion, uh, questions, comments, reports, anything at all. I suppose we had experiences as we sat. What was that like?
Hello.
Hi.
I found it interesting to hear your talk. At some points, very easy to follow, and at other points, I just went off thinking about it. And a minute or two later, or I don't know, came back.
Mm-hmm.
These are the kind of things I like to think about, and I like doing it with a group. And so far, what's impressed me the most about the story is that king with what he did, he had the courage to ask people that important question. There's questions I want to ask people, but I'm too sensitive about the answers they'll give me. They serve as triggers, and therefore I don't ask. Or I'm very careful about how I ask. And it seems like a chore to do that. And I don't want to be such a sensitive person. This training is helping me so that I can feel my reaction and not bite someone's head off. But I think that's what I'm most impressed with, the tenacity of that king, that he would have that courage.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that he's just going to ask it.
Yeah.
And he walks up to these people and says, what are you doing? Yeah. Yeah, it's very impressive.
It is. I never would have heard this story probably if you hadn't been doing it like this. And I'm going to trust your wisdom of waiting for the cliffhanger for next week. Because really, I got to look at my wanting that. And that's mostly what I sat with that last period, is wanting that.
Yeah.
And maybe this is all I'll get, and it's just fine. It is quite a bit.
Yeah.
And also, thank you for sharing some of your story and Soryu's story. That really adds to everything. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
I had a question about the obstructing experience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure exactly what the question is,
Mm-hmm.
but it's something in there about. It seems to imply that there is such a thing as obstructing, and such a thing as not obstructing, and that perhaps the obstructing versus not obstructing is more, maybe not more important, but is more relevant to something than the experience aspect of it. So yeah, I don't know if there's a question in there. That there's something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yeah, so there's this difference between obstructing and not obstructing experience. So
I guess maybe the question is, what is the difference between obstructing and not obstructing?
Yeah.
And how is it that one uses experience for that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a good question. It's a good question to study, to explore directly. So a lot of the time, we just have a sense, well, I'm obstructing experience all the time. Or maybe we have a sense I'm not obstructing experience ever. But to actually look carefully at experience and see what is obstruction, where is it, when is it, when am I doing it, am I ever doing it, am I ever not doing it? To examine and study that closely. So a lot of the time we just have a sense, well, I'm obstructing experience all day long, always, I can't stop it, I can't prevent it, but what does that actually mean? What are you doing? What does it mean to obstruct experience? And as you look closely and ask that question and investigate, you might find that, for example, sometimes it seems like you're obstructing experience, sometimes it seems like you're not. Of course, your assessment might change. You might have a sense, okay, I thought this was obstructing, but now I keep on working and I've been practicing for a little while and it doesn't seem any longer like that actually was obstructing. So what is it? Doing that direct exploration is very helpful. So, maybe starting points or something. You could just say, so one definition you could use is just a definition just to get started, just to explore it as a way of orienting the exploration at first. You'll lose it quickly enough, but you can use it to get started. Is to say, I'm obstructing experience if I'm thinking about myself. If I'm aware of anything other than the focus space, then let's just say I'm obstructing experience at that time. Now at that time, again, you're still having experience. Thinking about myself, I'm still having an experience that thinking about myself is still taking place inside of experience. So that has certain qualities. You can actually just directly attend to that. You can, of course, attend to the experience of thinking in a way that is clear, that isn't obstructed. You can just experience the thought come and go, experience it as mental image and emotional talk. That is not any longer obstructed. But then what's it like? What's happening?
Is it possible to completely experience obstruction?
I don't know.
I guess, is obstruction an experience, or is obstruction something else besides experience?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's experience. I suppose Shinzen would say that you could completely experience it. I'll just leave you hanging though. Yeah. Shinzen Young is kind of a elder in this tradition. He made the system of mindfulness that we talk about things with around here. So Shinzen says something that comes with a certain weight.
I was thinking that maybe one way of obstructing experience is the way the great king goes into the monastery and doesn't notice the most important thing in the room.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I can't imagine how many experiences I have in a day that I don't even notice,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly don't remember.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well said. Yeah, we really, it's shocking when we come into training how much of that you usually think that you're kind of mindful. At least I usually thought that I was kind of mindful. Like, I'm aware of most of what's going. Sometimes I miss things here or there, but I'm pretty much aware of most things most of the time, right? Like I'm looking at a room right now. I'm definitely aware of most of the room. There's some things maybe in the room that I'm not aware of, but most of the room I'm aware of. No, not at all. Not even kind of. I'm not actually looking at the room. To realize that, we go like, oh, wow. And especially in a place of training like this, we again and again have reminders because we have jobs, we have to cook a meal, have to prepare something, set things up on time. You notice, oh my gosh, I didn't even pay attention to that. I just wasn't looking there. And I didn't notice that thing needed to happen. Mm-hmm. And then there's feedback. We find out, oh, the meal has to be served. And then we notice, okay, very good. Things are not as they seem. Thought I was paying attention to everything. Turns out I'm actually missing some stuff. Very good. Maybe let's try paying some more attention. And then still we find out, oh, okay, there's still a level I'm missing. And even after we do the path for a long time, still, we're not aware of almost everything in the universe. Yes? More or less, the entire universe is completely beyond our perception right now. Most of the universe, we are in complete ignorance of right now. Complete don't know. So we get to find that out. Yeah.
I really appreciated your invitation to welcome the discomfort or the pain. I find it's very easy for me to say to myself, if I can change my experience, why not? And to recognize the choice I have as an awareness to do that at any time. But I'm finding too the value of like sitting with the discomfort, or even seeing if it has something to say, or a story to tell. And your words about how, to be in a body is to experience discomfort and pain, and also our connection with one another. And so, breathe, like really sitting with those spaces and breathing into them and kind of feeling some of that stagnant energy break up. I really appreciate. And then I'm kind of surprised as an awareness how many things I also kind of subconsciously hide from, or you just whether by being distracted or kind of covering something up or just redirecting my attention elsewhere. It's like, oh, now I've become oblivious to all that is there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So former resident Sanshin, kind of a way with words. And he said one time, it was a time after retreat, so he'd just been sitting for a week, and everyone's a little bit sore after a week of sitting, at least a lot of the time, not always, but quite often. There's some soreness. So he just sort of moved his shoulder around and was like, oh yeah, I'm dying. Which is, ultimately maybe where that's going. We're remembering that we have a body. The discomfort's reminding us that you can't always get what you want. And in fact, you eventually will die. You're dying right now. And I think is one of the main things that we try to avoid. So to be willing to just experience this discomfort is already doing amazing work. I can't really see just so you know, I can't see your video. Your video is frozen. So if you're there, you're welcome to say something. You don't have to. It so happens that your face is smiling right now, so that's kind of nice. Suppose that maybe you're smiling. Great. Thank you for that. Really appreciate you being here. Supposing you're still here. Technology.
Is the question concluded?
I guess for now, it's sort of hard to know, but here we are.
So how exactly do I know that I'm breathing or sitting or what have you the right way? Is there some kind of feedback that I should be picking up on as I meditate of, oh yeah, this breathing is making it more difficult to think and easier to experience, or something like that?
Yeah, so if you're using, that guideline metric that I offered is, so if you are thinking, then it's likely that in some way your posture is out of line. So you can just explore that. So if you sit with, at least if you're doing this technique and this approach, and this is just one approach, hello, welcome back. We'll return to you in a little bit, but for now we've moved on to a different question. So if you're using this approach, which is not something that you have to use, but just an offering, a suggestion, then generally speaking, if you're doing this posture, if the posture is fully aligned, the whole body is in alignment, then it should be a pretty stark and noticeable difference. So difference
that
between,
sounds to me like I've never actually either A, gotten the posture right, or B, noticed the stark and noticeable difference?
Yeah, it's entirely possible you just haven't noticed. A lot of the thinking that we're doing is just evaluating what's happening. And if that goes away, then to become aware that we aren't thinking can actually be kind of challenging. So it might be that you've just been in this state naturally quite often, perhaps even, and just haven't noticed it. It could also be that there is a sort of persistent postural issue of some sort. This is actually commonly the case. But it should be, I mean, almost night and day. You know, there's lots and lots of thoughts and they just keep coming, and no matter what I do, they're still here and they just keep on going, to very little thinking happening at all. Every now and then a thought comes. Aware of thinking every now and then. And it can take some time to find that. You know, maybe a few years.
Sounds hard. It might take the skilled a few years and the less skilled even longer.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know about skilled. I mean, I think a lot of skill just winds up coming as you do it. You know, maybe you're very advanced and you'll pick it up in like a few years, and you know, like two years and like 10 months rather than 3 years and 2 months. But you know, it's just kind of, a lot of this is just take the time that it takes. So, you know, difference in this path between a slowpoke and, I mean, once a century, someone comes along who's just very impressive, kind of unfairly impressive. But aside from that, like the difference between a slowpoke and a fast person in terms of the path is very small. You know, we're talking months typically, not years. And if we're talking years, we're talking about like 1 or 2 years, not like 10 or 20. Although there are people.
Is it just that slow that in all my time here, I haven't noticed me getting better, or contrarily, is it actually, I think it's more the same as Soryu's thing of I'm probably getting better in hard to notice ways if I am.
Yeah, that. And then also Peace Pilgrim says that a lot of the time, the reason that people give up on this path so often is that you need to take a step completely before you get the rewards of that step. So if you do 90% of the work, you don't get 90% of the benefit. You get close to 0% of the benefit. So just at that, so it's commonly the case that people will do 90% of the work and then feel like this is impossible, nothing is happening, I'll never do this. Why? Because I've received 0 benefits so far, and that means that I've done 0% of the work, and I've been doing all this work. Time to just give up.
Right. That one webcomic about someone digging extremely deep down into the ground and giving up just as there's a large chunk of gold below them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that can happen in this path. Well, and it is often like that. So don't fill the hole in prematurely.
Thank you.
Yes. Was there anything else on that, Hannah? I suppose you're Hannah anyway. I'm not sure. Maybe not. Great. Anything else?
Joshin,
Yeah.
wonderful to see you and be with you. It was interesting when you were talking about your experience with your parents, and it was like being transported to that time. And maybe in conjunction with what Daniel just asked, that knowing what you were going through and how incredibly changed and happy you were in a short amount of time was very unnerving for me as a parent. But it started a road, what was it, maybe 3 years, where I really dug myself and my life into a complete abyss.
Mm.
And then to really take hold of what you were suggesting and living, and really having that become a much more significant practice, and it's continuing to grow. But I would say, in conjunction with what Daniel was just asking, it was like, or the story even, it's like the fruits of the practice now almost seem like they were immediately felt, or they were there.
Mm-hmm.
And persistence, and so many times of like just not knowing what's going on, not knowing if I'm doing it right or anything like that, but just staying with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really thank you for bringing that up again today, because it's an example of waves keep coming. Now there's a very significant wave with my mother in this crisis,
Mm.
where she's not well and not being able to be there.
Mm.
And thank God for this practice, to be able to get through this challenging time. So thank you for everything today and every day.
Yeah, really sorry to hear that. Maybe we can talk more offline about grandma. So everyone knows this is my dad. And thank you.
I'll be signing off now. Thank you for
Thank you, friend.
hosting this and these in general.
Thanks for coming. So we have time for maybe one more share or question. A kind of quick one, or we can just spend a little bit of time in silence. It's all good.
I do have another comment.
Hmm.
Just that last experience between you and your dad, and then the questions that were asked before. Because I was wondering if I ever notice when I'm thinking of others or not thinking of others. And when your dad was talking to you, I was not thinking about anything except for your dad talking to you.
Hmm.
And then I thought about the family meeting I'm having tonight, and my kids aren't interested in this.
Hmm.
So I noticed the difference, that I did have a few moments of just being with you guys and the group, and then it changed. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely.
In retrospect, I looked back and it was just about you guys, and it feels delicious.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, it's that, that kind of like suddenly we're there kind of sense. It's like something real's happening. We drop in, we're able to attend full-heartedly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a gift to be able to witness.
Hmm.
And a friend of mine said to me recently, to see is to eat. To it was like to be witnessed is to be food.
Well, I think it also goes both ways. Just to listen to someone is extremely powerful. It's sort of a feedback loop, where on the one hand, if we're real, if we're showing up, if we're really there, then suddenly people are pulled in. And then on the other hand, if we just drop in and pay attention to someone, then they show up. It's sort of a two-directional process. And it's, I find it's still true, it's still the case over conference style stuff, and also it's much harder. So I appreciate you all being here. And to the extent that you are, and I hope that we do see each other in person at some point. Thanks for showing up. So, do we have any announcements? Great. Well, thank you for showing up. Thanks for coming. Nice to be here with you. Nice to be here with you on this planet. And please do take care of yourselves and take care of the planet.